Well, hello friends. Today I'm out in the yard and I'm doing a little bit of those tying up projects, filling in little holes in my perennial bed, planting some items that have been sitting out my back door for a while. So if you're a gardener or happen to love gardening as much as I do, you know that you end up throughout the whole season, you say you're going to be done, and then you go to a garden center, you go to a nursery, and you find plants and you buy them, and then you're not sure yet what you're going to do with them, but you wanted them. So you put them outside by your back door, by your garden shed, and you look at them and then you think, okay, I need to do something with them. So that's what I'm doing today. So I'm filling in with some flowers that I got, some perennials. They're ones that I really love. It's Estrantia, and it's also called Masterwort. It to me is such a unique flower, and we'll look at it closer here in a little bit. And then I have some Scabiosa I want to plant. Both of those are perennials, and they're going to do really well here. They like kind of zone 5 through zone 7, a lot of those, and they like part shade too. They can take full sun, but you want to make sure the water is going to be adequate in full sun because they don't like to be dried out completely. Anyway, so I'm going to plant those. I have a few smaller specimen type plants, a couple ferns I got. I thought we could plant all those. So let's go out, see what I bought, and kind of go over why I love them. So I've been making little piles around the yard. I actually need a weed too, but planting flowers is more fun than weeding. So I have some over there and some here, and you're gonna see that. So this is the Estrantia, and what I love about this one is look at that variegated leaf. Now these are blooming a little bit earlier than they would usually bloom here. They'd usually bloom more like mid to late July. But look at that flower. It's almost like a pincushion flower. It has a really kind of almost tropical quality to it. If you've ever seen a passion vine or passion flower, it kind of reminds me of those. So this one, I think it's called Masterpiece. Let's look here. Yes, it's a Masterpiece. And I love the variegated color on it, and that's what I'm really excited about using. It likes part sun, and it can take full sun if you have it in a good spot where you get adequate moisture. If you have a spot that's extra dry or gets really hot during a dry period of summer, this could really kind of be hard on these. But I think I'm gonna plant some against my shed here in some part sun. And then I have a few other varieties up here, which you're gonna see. So up here, it looks somewhat the same, but you can see this one doesn't have the variegated leaf. This one's called Venice. It's the same flower, but called Venice, and look at the darker color flower, which I really like. This one's fading a little bit, but those are so pretty. And I just think they have such a unique quality. I mean, just look at how they're kind of, I don't know, I like how the flowers get high up away from the leaves, so it really sets them apart. They just have a nice color to them. Then I have the Scabiosa I bought, which I think is super fun. Again, it's that foliage that I love. This one's called Thunder and Lightning. And it has that great variegation on the leaves, which I really like. And the flowers are somewhat similar. I think that's what's so fun about this. If you look really close, look how close they are to each other, but yet different too. So we get a nice kind of deep color here, which will look really good. These, I think I'm gonna put right in this area. I wanted to bring this corner out a little bit this year, which I did. And you can see now, when I put one of these here, it really pops against the green velvet box that I have. There's some calumet back there. There's a green mountain boxwood. This is all my garden shed. So all this perennial bed is where my peonies are. A lot of perennials. The peonies are over with now, but we have other things that are coming, which is exciting. So this is where I want to plant these. And I always just kind of try to go around, lay out all my plants I want to plant first, and then kind of see where everything's going to go, and then go in and start planting. So I'm working on what's the south side of my garden shed, but it has quite a bit of tree coverage from a canopy above it, which you can see here. So it gets a good amount of shade, making this a pretty good part shade spot. The one thing with this area, it can be on the drier side, so I'm definitely gonna have to watch it for water. In general, I'd like to put a drip line in here eventually anyway. So what I wanna do is start adding in these perennials, I think kind of around, not fully as the border, but in front of a lot of the box that I have established. So I'm gonna variate them and go kind of every other with a variegated, and then the Venice, which isn't variegated, and kind of go back and forth. And you can see I'm just kind of making a ring around here and going down the line. So in here right now is kind of a little bit more, the calumet has really started to naturalize. It's starting to have little, you can see starts of little ones kind of all over. And I do try to dig out and kind of stop it from going too much. And so I want to get something else in here that can get established and kind of start offsetting against the calumet, which I'm glad the calumet does so well. And then I have some smaller hydrangeas in here. Oh, we had a kitty pop out and say hi, and then get stage fright and went back. And then on down here, this is again where I'm gonna put that Scabiosa also, which will do really well around that corner. And I'm really excited to kind of watch that go. So when I get ready to plant, I might do some weeding as I'm doing it too. But just like everything else, I'm gonna treat these with some biotone in the hole first. So you know I love to use biotone. Biotone is organic, but it's just a starter fertilizer. It's just to help the roots get acclimated. And to me, anytime you can start getting roots more acclimated and give them a little bit of a jump start in the ground, you're gonna have better just like future with them, because you want them to really establish themselves in that first year. So watering is super important. And then I've just found biotone, you know, I've been using it for a few years and I really do love it. So I'm gonna put that in all the holes too, but I'm gonna go around and start planting, which most of these areas, the areas are already clear, so I can just pretty much easily put them in. So I thought we'd start and then just kind of get on down the line and get them all planted. So on this side where I want to start planting them, I do have one planter here by a door, just kind of a fun planter that I put some Sansevieria in and some annuals. But down below it, there is a climbing hydrangea that's finally starting, they take quite a few years to get established, but it's finally starting to cling to the wall and climb up. But this is where I want to start with one. So you can see here, this is to me what's always interesting about gardening is you can have one flower bed that isn't, you know, that large, and in different areas it can vastly change if it's wet or dry. So this is the east side of the shed and it stays fairly moist over here. But when I go around the corner here on the south side, it gets a lot drier. So you have to just watch for that and account for whatever you're planting and know how that's gonna work. So you can see I have my hole dug. This is when I'm gonna put in my biotone. Again, I just sprinkle it down the hole. It's not a harsh chemical, it's organic, and it really is a soft way just to kind of give those roots something. Now, you can even tell that this has a little bit, do you see all of that on top? They do this to help the moisture stay in. So that's also where you know you're gonna need to watch these and not let them dry out, especially in their first year here as they're getting established. So I'm just kind of, since I'm doing this one-handed too, I'm taking the bottom and I just wanted to push it slightly so it would pop out. Now these roots, they do not look too tight. They don't look like they're encircling too much. And I can easily, do you see how I just easily am kind of moving them around? That's all I want to do. Since these aren't tight and encircling themselves, I'm not worried about breaking these up too much. The big thing is I don't want to plant it too deep. I want to keep it the same level it is so that it was in that container, which is perfect where it's at. And now I'm just going to put all this soil back around. So when you're putting the soil back around, you need to press slightly, but you don't just want to stomp on it because it could damage the roots. It could be hard on it. You don't want to do that. So you want to nicely put that soil around, break up any big pieces, and then slightly press it as you're going. So you can see I'm pressing it, and that's going to help get out some of the air bubbles right now, but then we'll water it and that will help get out more of them. That's kind of the big thing, is the watering is going to help get out any of those air bubbles that could be in around those roots, which you don't want. So before I go down the line too much here, I know a big question I always get is amending the soil. What if you have really clay soil? I know I'm blessed with really rich, loamy black soil, but that's not what most people have. They either have a lot of rocks, it's hard to get through, it's clay. So I always say amend a soil that you feel isn't really good up to about 50%. And I would amend it with about 50% of a good organic compost, but mix it with your native soil some, because you can't only rely on your amendment. Eventually, those roots hopefully will work into your native soil a little bit. And what the amendment will do is help the native soil. It will improve it. It will make it retain moisture, maybe be more loamy, and be able to get those roots to work through. So about 50%, I would, just amend it with a good compost. And compost, because compost isn't necessarily soil, but it has a lot of good things in it that help your soil and improve your soil. And that's what's really important. So don't worry if you have bad soil. That doesn't mean you can't garden. It just means you may have to do a couple extra steps, but over time you will be improving your soil, which is wonderful. Okay, I got all of this planted. Honestly, it doesn't take that long to plant. What takes longer is to remember to watch and care for them throughout the growing season. So since I don't have any drip line or anything here yet, it's gonna be making sure my watering is happening as often as it needs. So they don't want to sit dry. These don't like to necessarily dry out too much. So I will be watching these a few times a week and making sure they have what they need. Like I said, the south area can get more dry than the first few I planted, so I'll be watching that closer, and I'll water them really well here today because I just planted them. You always want to water something right away. Start with a well-watered plant before you plant it. Water it once it's in the ground to get out any of those air bubbles, and just to make sure it has a moist environment just to start off the day with, because it really needs that. It doesn't want to start off dry. So I'll get these watered, but I also thought we could talk about and plant some smaller plants I have, you know, kind of some small ferns, some more specimen pieces. I think I even have a Hawathia I need to plant. You know, it's those ones that I didn't think maybe I had one, so I thought when I saw these at a nursery that I needed one. I know, I didn't need one, but I wanted one. So I thought we could pot those up and kind of just go over some planting and kind of see why I love to do those types of things. So what I have in front of me, I have roving potting areas. I do it wherever I am. Today, it's not too windy behind the house here in the backyard, so that's where I'm potting things up. I have a few things that I just purchased the other day, and I have all the essentials I need to pot things up. So I have some new pots that I got. Obviously, usually I just use whatever I have, but I got these from my favorite maker, Peter at Wakefield Handmade. I love these because there's something about specimen plants, just like individual plants, that go into wonderful pottery that, I don't know, you can just kind of pass down and enjoy. These are great gifts too, but I just love, they make a garden really feel established and cozy and homey, but it gives it a personality too, where, you know, you kind of know the gardener by the containers they use, I feel like. So that's what I'm using today. But here, let's look at the plants I'm gonna put in them. So I got a bird's nest fern because I love ferns and I love bird nest ferns. But the important thing to remember about them is they don't like to be planted too deep. Their crown likes to sit slightly high, and they like to be somewhat contained. So their roots don't need a massive pot that is, you know, so many times bigger than them. They want to just be about the size they're in or a size larger. So this is about a size larger than the container it's in, which will give the roots a little bit of room to grow for a while. And they really like that. They like to be slightly tighter in there. And that's what we're gonna put this one in. And I like how it will lift it and give it a little bit more presence too, because they do have that open vase shape slightly. I have another fern I got also that I think I'm gonna put in this one. It's a type of, I think some people call it a crocodile bird's nest fern. So it has kind of, look at the scaly look of it on its fronds. To me, that is just so special. You can't go wrong with that. And again, they don't like to be planted too deep because one, when you water them then their crown, so the crown is the inside where you can see there's a new frond right there that wants to unfurl and open up. This crown is where all those new growth come out of. And if that sits too low and it sits in water, it rots. And then new fronds can't come out. So that's why they like to be planted at the right level. So then I also have a Hawathia here. I love Hawathia. I think they're just really unique and architectural. I'm putting it in a little bit wider pot, not necessarily because it needs to be, but it does open up as it grows and it will give it a little bit more surface area, which I kind of like. So again, it's just kind of a personal preference. Then I do have a variegated Boston fern. I used all of my larger ones up over at my mom's for her hanging pots. And so I kind of miss the color with all my pots in the backyard. So I'm gonna plant one of those up too. And then I have, one more fern. And now I'm doing this one for inside the house. So I have usually either on my coffee table or in the kitchen, some small areas and small planters. And this one has been sitting empty for a bit for my coffee table. So this one will be the perfect thing. I'm gonna have people over tonight. So, right now it's about a little bit bigger than the size container it's in, so it will last in here for a few months, and eventually then I'll need to size it up. But for now, it'll be perfect for indoors. I love to put things like plants indoors because unlike flowers, I don't have to change them out all the time. They last for quite a while. And then every so often what I do is I set them outside during the growing months so they can really get, kind of more the way they like to grow and in that environment. So I'll set them outside, then bring them in when I'm having people over. And that's why it's nice to put them in nice containers. You can bring them inside and they look ready to go. You can take them outside. So I'm gonna start with my soils, and you know what I love and what I've always used. So the containers are gonna get, of course, organic all-purpose potting soil. You know that's what I love. And they also, I've been doing this for a couple years now, is some plant tone in them too. So plant tone is just an all-purpose organic plant food. I've used it in my vegetable garden. I've used it for actually my boxwood and my arborvitae for fertilizing them. And it's just a great way to slowly feed and improve, you know, a container planting. I don't like to use the synthetic fertilizers that pump them with steroids all the time. I like to give something more natural. And so to me, organic plant tone adds something to the soil. Every so often, you know, a couple times a year, if you want to, you can sprinkle it in around the soil. And as you water it, it goes down into the soil, and that's great too. But I start by my soil in the container and then some plant tone. For a container like this, I always make sure any container I plant in, indoors, outdoors, has drainage. So you can see a big hole there in the bottom. And I will always put a shard of a broken piece of pottery over it. I have cats outdoors, so I always have broken pottery, it seems like. Not the good stuff, but the other stuff seems to every so often get broken because I put the good stuff in certain spots where cats and things don't get to it. But you can see, I always like to make sure, so this is a curved piece, and so it will sit and allow water to drain underneath and through that hole, but it won't allow all the dirt just to escape through it as water goes through it. So I always start with that in the bottom, and I always have different pieces for different sizes, however I need it. And then I start by adding in the soil. So obviously the soil, you want to use that all-purpose potting soil. Potting soil is important for a lot of reasons, but the big thing is it's literally formulated for containers, meaning that potting soil, as you can see, is really nice and light. It allows moisture to drain through really well, but it also allows roots to get through really easily. So it has a good mixture of everything those plants need and their roots use to be able to get through, but also drain. Topsoil or just soil in the ground outside would be way too heavy and would weight the soil down and weight everything in there down too much and hold on to water too well. And that's not what you want here. So you can see this is just perfect, how it kind of just is really nice and breaks apart really easily. So I put that in, and then I do sprinkle in some plant tone. I did this with my hanging pots. I did this with all my containers. And now it's ready to plant. So when I want to plant, I will always just take that plant right out of the container, which if your plant is in there kind of tight, I just always squish the bottom of the container slightly, because that means it's probably just well grown in there. So when you squish it, you should be able then to pop it up. Now ferns can get pretty tight roots, and you can see those are really tight. It's really nice actually. So what I always do try to do is just slightly break it up. Nothing too drastic. Ferns don't want to be, messed with near as much as some other plants. So you can see what I'm doing is just kind of creating some breaks all around. Nothing that's gonna damage the plant. I'm not going too deep. I'm just slightly breaking up, because what it's gonna do, see all those little roots now that are poking out? That's root growth that will hopefully branch outwards and into this new soil. And that's what's super important. So I'm slightly just breaking it and then setting it in to see where we're at. Now remember, that loose soil we just put in, it will recede in the container once it's watered. It will work down, as will the plant with that soil. So I make sure that it's at the level I want, not too low. So now I'm gonna backfill with more potting soil, and this one will be done. I potted up both the ferns now. They're both sitting just right, and I do even go to make sure I don't have any soil up inside, kind of where its new fronds want to come out. You can see little baby ones in there. So obviously if you're gonna use terracotta, that's what I always like to use, because I think it breathes. It has a little bit more breathability for the roots. They dry out, but then they also are able to water easily. I like terracotta. Now, if you use terracotta in the house, you do know if it's not a glazed terracotta, which this isn't, water could damage things. So you always want to put a glazed tray underneath it. See how this has a shiny film on top? It's glazed so water won't seep through to the bottom and damage things. I would also always prop it up with like a piece of cork or some type of, just anything to protect if you're putting it on a wood surface or something indoors. That's just important. So now we're gonna move on to the Hawathia, which I love Hawathia because they have such, I love agave too, I love aloe, and they have that same kind of idea. And they're just beautiful. I think they bloom, in which a lot of people don't realize they bloom, and they bloom a really beautiful bloom. And it's a nice kind of usually like upside down trumpet-like bloom. And actually, surprisingly, hummingbirds I see on mine when they do bloom, they love them. So what I wanna do with this one is, I'm gonna also use the all-purpose potting soil, but Hawathia are like cacti. They like to dry out, obviously. They like to stay somewhat dry. So I have used, a succulent cactus mix on it too. Those soils have a little bit more bark in them, and they dry out and drain a little bit quicker. it's again all about watering and moisture levels. So, you know, as long as I watch these, I use all-purpose potting soil with them all the time and they work really well. And that to me just depends on what you're comfortable with, but a good, you know, cactus mix type soil works well too. So I'm gonna do the same all-purpose potting soil in here. I'm gonna plant this up, gonna plant my other fern up, and we'll be good to go. Everything is potted up. I am finishing up by making sure I water. Now, ferns are something too that I do try to make sure and not water them right into the center of their crown, because again, I don't want water just sitting there. Same with Hawathia actually. And you know, most plants in general don't need to have the water just dropped right over them, but you can see what will happen when I do water these things. I'm doing it very lightly here at the moment just so it doesn't spray everywhere. But the soil will actually recede, and you can see it right here. See how the soil dropped down now lower? That's what's gonna happen, and that's normal. So you can compensate for that if it drops down too much. You can account for it how you need to if you need to add a little bit more soil. I usually, when I'm planting, try to account for that. This little guy is gonna go into the house at the moment at the coffee table. I'm having some friends over tonight, so I think one of those ferns might go sit in the kitchen on the counter, kind of. Now, for Hawathia, when they're still small like this, which they're all different sizes and types, but before it really branches out and opens up, I sometimes will put, you know, some small decorative pebbles or just a little bit of a pea gravel around it. You could do sand too. But that, you know, just kind of is a nice way to dress up a pot, make it look a little bit more, you know, decorative depending where you put it. But I like to water these all well outside before I take them in so the water can drip through outside. And then some of these will go sit on the back patio, but they'll all be happy. Obviously, I need to go water those Estrantia we planted too. Okay, so I'm gonna water my Estrantia, but I hope you can see that honestly, it's kind of fun to find some different perennials. It's, you know, when we get into this time of year where maybe all of our spring work is kind of winding down and it's more into maintenance mode and just keeping up with things, it's kind of fun to go to a garden center, see some of the unique perennials they get in, because they get unique ones, especially your local garden centers get unique ones all throughout the growing season. They're a little bit more premium, so they're an investment, and that's why you want to know the area you're putting them and how and what they need and the watering, so you can make sure to take care of them properly. So always read those labels, do some research, make sure you know what you're getting and know how it's going to grow. That's why I always say use your growing season and your growing zone. So if you know your planting zone, you can just Google it with your zip code, and it will tell you then when you go to a nursery what plants work in your area, which usually nurseries are going to carry what works in your area. But it's just fun to get some. I'm really excited to see these Estrantia keep growing and hopefully give me so many blooms. And now to put all the ferns and Hawathia I planted in some different places. So thanks for watching. I have a lot more to do. As always, when you share these videos, it helps me a lot, but it helps everyone see that, guess what? If I can garden, anybody can garden. That's the fun part. Gardening's always evolving, it's always changing, and we're always learning. I know I am, so I hope you are too. So check my website, wyseguide.com, for all my videos, for all my recipes. They're all on there. Until next time, I'm gonna go water.